When there's too much of carbon dioxide and other so-called greenhouse gases, our atmosphere ends up turning into an oven where the sunlight enters the planet but doesn't end up leaving. Air pollution has a significant lifetime impact on your cognition, your breathing, your heart. You can get pulmonary disease.
And how much are we building? We started to look into these numbers. We are building the size of New York every month. I love architecture. I would love to practice it, but not like this. Air pollution essentially has two issues, right? One is how do you capture or collect it? And second is what do you do with it?
And our devices collect and store these pollutants. And that's why the aspiration is to figure out a logistics model which will get these particulates collected across the city and given to Tejas.
We have a 3-stage process that we work with. It is collect, process, build. So we collect the carbon from various partners. We work with a 200-year-old craft and artisans, and we build any plain pattern or customizable tiles over here. So that's essentially the larger process of collect, process, and build.
Welcome to Mindful Businesses, presented by Sarani, and I'm your host, Vidya Iyer. In our podcast, we bring to you brands that are mindful in their practices and processes. A mindful business adopts and employs sustainable social, economic, and environmental practices. With countries, the UN, and global organizations setting frameworks and targets to reduce carbon emissions, we cannot emphasize how important it is to work in cooperation and in partnership with adjacent businesses to achieve these goals. Today, we bring to you two energetic and mindful entrepreneurs who are doing just that. We have Angad Daryani of Praan, Clean Air for All, and Tejas Sidnal of Carboncraft Design, products made with upcycled carbon. Tejas joins us from Hubli, India, and Angad joins us from Mumbai, India. Welcome, Tejas and Angad.
Thanks for having us. This is Angad.
Thank you for having us. This is Tejas reporting from Hubli.
We're recording this episode on November 21st, 2021, and COP26 is in progress in Glasgow, where world leaders and delegates are meeting to discuss how to tackle pressing issues regarding climate change and limit global warming. Tell our listeners, Angad specifically, how does carbon get into our atmosphere?
I think just from an evolutionary standpoint, historically, whenever animals or specific reactions took place in nature, just as how fundamental chemistry works, you have to have conservation of energy. And this conservation of energy in physics is often calculated as kilojoules or joules. But in the chemical world, you have to have the same kind of conservation of energy, but that's sometimes done through breaking or forming different bonds in materials. So one such gas or material happens to be carbon.
Mm-hmm.
And in the atmosphere, the carbon we refer to as carbon dioxide. When there's too much of carbon dioxide and other so-called greenhouse gases, our atmosphere ends up turning into an oven where the sunlight enters the planet but doesn't end up leaving because there's continuous total internal reflection. And that's how our planet heats up, and that's what we're all trying to solve together as humanity.
So when you talk about greenhouse gases, which are the other gases besides carbon dioxide?
I think the second most prominent one is methane. The source for emission for methane, one of the largest sources, cattle. That's why the beef industry is often taken into consideration, because many of these cattle farms have high methane emissions. But methane as a gas has a significantly lower volumetric impact to global warming compared to carbon dioxide. Simply because CO2 is more prominent, all thanks to humanity. And additionally, it's a very stable gas. So breaking up those molecules are very challenging. The other gases that we deal with are not so much associated with global warming, but with air pollution. There's carbon monoxide, sulfur oxides, nitrous oxides, and CFCs, which ended up putting a hole into our ozone layer. That's the context. I think Tejas and I fall into the overlap between air pollution and global warming, because we started as air pollution and air pollutant mitigation companies, and have slowly moved into solving challenges associated with global warming.
You talked about air quality, so when you open your weather app on your phone or on your computer, it often gives you the air quality for that day, moderate, high particles and things like that. And in India specifically, several cities, the schools had to be shut down because of bad air quality, say in Delhi in November 2019. So how bad is the situation?
When you see dirty water, right, you can see it and you have an urge not to drink it. And we drink water, a healthy person, 3 to 4 liters in a day. But with respect to air, we breathe like 86,000 plus times in a day, right? Multiple times in a second. So why do we not put thought into what we're breathing as opposed to what we're eating or drinking?
Mhm.
That's one of the bigger psychological barriers. But if you ask me how bad it is, I mean, we're a unit of power of 10 away from what we should be, or power of 100 away from what the air quality should be, for it to consider it to be healthy. Like PM levels sometimes cross 999 parts per million in New Delhi in these seasons. It's supposed to be like below 50. So it's a significant problem to try and solve. And the fundamental challenge, I think, is that we only give attention to it in winter season. But the reality is that throughout the year, we're already in really bad air quality standard.
Mhm.
Because there's fundamentally infinite sources of pollutants as particulate matter, the challenge becomes even harder and harder to try and solve.
So why in winter season specifically? Is it because the cold air just kind of traps it?
No, I don't think. In fact, particles lose energy at lower temperatures. Just from, there's lower vibrations in solid matter when you have a lower energy level. In winter, there's a large number of rice husk and stubble which is burnt. Now, the challenge is that since Delhi is landlocked, a lot of the air or wind that's flowing from neighboring states like Haryana, Punjab, where large farms exist, is channeled towards New Delhi. And with India's economic growth, there's more spending on infrastructure. So there's massive infrastructure projects being taken up across the country, and that's leading to a higher amount of particulate matter being dispensed into the atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, if you ask a wealthy person today who can afford a Tesla, would you buy a Mercedes or a Tesla? They'll buy a Mercedes in India. So there's a clear market adoption issue as well with renewable energy and electric vehicles. So all of that put together gives you all this grief in the winter season.
Bombay also has similar problems. There was a landfill which self-combusted in 2016. I was actually in Bombay and I would wake up tired, as if I'd run a mile.
I was there as well. That was in Devna, right? I lived in Chembur most of my life. I saw that happening as well. But frankly speaking, it didn't feel very different because Chembur has also the RCF and the other on the pollution. So it's also known for having pollution most of the time in that area.
So Chembur is adjacent neighborhood to Deonar where the landfill was self-combusting, and RCF is the chemical fertilizer factory, which is also in the Chembur-Deonar area.
Yes, and that's what makes it really unique in terms of an area which is locked between these pollutants. And that's where I lived most of my life. And I know what you mean. There was that time and we could feel it, but not so much different for us because I didn't feel the difference as much, but it was there. Yes, the levels of pollution really increased quite a bit at that time.
There's a reason why Indian athletes often don't perform as well in soccer or other sports in the athletics, not because we don't have the infrastructure or people don't have the abilities. It's because naturally to exercise and match performance of foreign athletes, our lungs have to work 7 to 10 times harder because our air pollution is so much worse. And so if you're already exerting yourself that much to train and to get that desired output, you often reach saturation when you have to perform on the global scale.
It's kind of shocking that when we think of pollution, we think of, oh, my skies are not blue, or, the birds are not doing well, but we don't realize that it damages your health, your everyday life, and even performance of athletes and your health in many, many different forms.
Yeah, I mean, if you see even today, 9 out of the 10 people living in the urban areas are living in like polluted regions right now. A classic example that I usually see it as a visual is during the pandemic. In Mumbai, there was a video that was floated around that dolphins came back in Mumbai, and everyone was going crazy about it. Like, how did dolphins come back over here? And that video was floating around. And it was exciting to see it, and everyone was sharing images of before and after and how it was. And now, when you go back, it's just back again, the same thing. And we are on the road. There's again the complex issue of air pollution, vehicles, human industries, a lot of it coming together back again. So yes, we have to solve it.
So you're talking about the dolphins in the Arabian Sea, which came back during the pandemic.
One funny, it's not funny, it's actually quite sad, but the reason I say it's funny is because it's a number we all know, but we pretend to sleep about. And that is that, COVID-19 unfortunately killed about 3.5 million people in the first year. Air pollution kills 7 million people every single year. We don't take it nearly as seriously. The difference is that I think the reason COVID got more attention is the time frame to death was, a couple of weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Air pollution has a significant lifetime impact on your cognition, your breathing, your heart. You can get pulmonary disease, memory. All these are significantly affected. And if you're really unlucky, then you'll start seeing significant, respiratory problems, serious diseases. What happened amidst the pandemic was that for both of us, since air pollution disappeared, our company suddenly became irrelevant for that 1 year. No one was thinking about us, right? One investor I remember literally told me, is like, Angad, this seems like a very futuristic idea. It's not really needed right now in the pandemic.
Yeah.
In a few months, you're going to call me again because your air pollution will come back when the farmers burn the stubble. So it's a disease or a problem that we are, I think, very conditionally fond of talking about.
Yeah, I remember having a similar, same conversation rather with someone else as well. And it is the same, like, are you going to get enough raw materials? Because there is no pollution right now. And it is so funny to have that conversation. It's just right now because everything is shut, like literally shut. So it is going to start, right? So we're just going to be on the same stage again. So what do you do at that time?
So all these pollutions, like you say, when industries were shut, there was no pollution. Industries are up. Of course, there are now pollutions, but many of the industries, especially at least in the US context, they want to become net zero by 2050. So they are going to renewable energy, sustainable practices, moving to sustainable raw materials, scrubbing their effluents. But there are some industries which you cannot avoid, and they will still continue to emit. Which are some of those industries?
I think net zero should not be the right metric to hit. It's like, how much of my lifetime emission can I offset while being entirely net zero? That's when you will see a reversal. Because to get to net zero, you will have significant emissions. You have to change your entire energy source. You have to change your entire grid, all your vehicles, and set up systems to capture the carbon emissions already done. So that is my personal take on net zero. The second challenge is that many of the so-called sustainable companies and sustainable materials are not regulated. So there is more of what makes you look good than what is actually being done. Right? I think Tejas and I have seen that we have mutual friends who claim to use air pollution but are actually picking up some other things and selling their product as made from air pollution. And they have exceptional branding, exceptional names associated with them because of that story that's being sold. I'm only 23 years old, right? So when I was growing up, I think for us it was always that the future's pretty bleak, because why are we working so hard in school when the rivers are polluted, animals are going extinct, XYZ. So for me, 30 years is more than my lifetime till date, to wait till people go to net zero. And so that's a very large number for me to take people seriously. They're saying in the next 30 years, like, you're probably not going to be alive and you leave it for us to deal with, right? So that's sort of my take on this situation.
That's a really good point. So the 70-year-old politician says we'll be a net zero in 30 years, and he's really not.
Right.
He's not really going to be around to enforce it.
Exactly.
My perspective to that is essentially talking about something which is like 30 years down the line is way too long. You don't know what's going to happen, what technology is going to change, how we're going to live. We're going to be in Mars. It's not going to be the same planet. It's going to be different challenges. We don't know. Until then, we have Earth. So I don't believe in having really 30-year-old plans and then really defining everything around that. What's going to happen in the next 3 years is what really matters. And we are already seeing it's scientific data out there. 1.5 degree warming would really be sort of devastating to a lot of coastal cities. They're all going to be drowning. And what are we going to do then? These are things that I think we need to sort of think about more in terms of goals. Net zero is just a number that we're just going to more like validate ourselves, and the share prices are going to go up. And I think we just need to sort of, as Angad really mentioned, that we need to work backwards from what we can offset and start our journey from there.
What would you guys suggest?
To take it as an engineering problem, right? How many billion tons of CO2 must be removed from the atmosphere to slow down global warming and rather negate the rate? So when you know what the outcome should be, try to solve from there. How's a product designed, right? It's like, who's the end user? What problem must it solve? At what cost? For how long? And if you have that, then you know what to build on. I don't think politicians and corporate businessmen who have no scientific educational background are competent enough to try and solve global warming problems. And this is just coming from somebody who wants to see this solved and spending all their time trying to do it. But one person's not going to make any significant change.
Yeah, actually, it makes more sense for him to solve this problem than us, right? He's 23. He has more life to live than us right now.
Or rather work like crazy through it, because these guys are setting 2070 goals.
He's 10 years younger to me, so he has more life to live anyway. But yes, to the scale at which we are building right now, if I have to look at some solutions from my perspective as an architect, when we started to look at how do we build buildings and the way we are building right now, and how much are we building? We started to look into these numbers. We are building the size of New York every month.
And this is in India?
No, it's in the world right now. We are building the size of New York every month. That's crazy. Imagine 12 New Yorks are coming in every year. And that's the scale at which we are building right now. But who talks about materials? Who talks about how we are building? What are we using? So for me as an architect, it was really important, if I'm going to really practice and build more buildings, I am only a part of the problem. I'm just polluting more. So why do I do that at the first place? I would love to practice architecture. Really, I love architecture. I would love to practice it, but not like this.
Like you say, what materials we use to construct is so important to achieve these goals of not releasing more carbon into the air. Now that you know how much carbon is going to be released every year, how will you solve it, Angad?
So it's not just how much carbon is released every year, it's how much do we need to offset. Because the 1.5 degree rise in temperature, we probably won't be able to control that in the right time. But before it goes to 2 degrees and 2.5 degrees, where a plethora of trapped viruses and bacteria are going to be let back into the oceans and the air, and also cause cities like Mumbai to disappear. So it has to be an extreme multi-prong approach. And the reason I say extreme is because you have to hit stop and then you have to hit reset. you don't have to say, let's try doing things in parallel, because people don't like change. And if people don't like change, there's a psychological barrier to making transition happen. But when there's political will and when there is enforcement that this is the only way, that's when things may change. So from our side, of course, we're like even in CO2 emission capture utilization, you have to pick one battle. If you pick all battles, you're not going to move anywhere. So Praan as a company is focused on direct air capture of CO2, and we started initially as a particulate company. That's how we said we started as air pollution mitigation technology, and then moved into CO2 capture as well. So we have to, one, control the CO2 which is being emitted to begin with today. That's what's called capture at source. We don't do that. Our friends at Carbon Clean and other companies do that, and they're now big, but even their big is like ultra nano size for what's being emitted right every day.
Yeah.
And then direct air capture companies, it's so hard from an engineering standpoint and a cost standpoint that it's sad that there's only 8 or 10 companies like us who are doing it this aggressively, that are funded and have like ultra rigid timelines. Like my team has to work Saturdays and Sundays to meet those timelines. It's absurd. And at the same time, then you have to store away the CO2 permanently for 1,000+ years. Because if you use it as dry ice or other means where it's going to get back into the atmosphere, you just spent a whole lot of money, a lot of energy, and a lot of carbon to capture some carbon which was thrown back into the. So that's where, we look to companies like that of Tejas, or, companies like Charm Industrial, who pack away the CO2 for thousands of years underground to try and make a change.
Mhm.
And by the way, while this is happening, like, everyone should buy electric cars, or your energy source needs to move to solar, wind, geothermal, nuclear, and your grid needs to be changed. So there's a whole lot of work to be done. If for those who are greedy and financial outcome focused, which is majority of humanity, I think there's tremendous market opportunity no matter what you do, should you choose to work in climate.
I must add that Praan means life in Hindi.
Right, stream of life, yeah. Yes.
How did you two meet? You're about 10 years apart, so you didn't overlap in school.
No. I think I met Angad at a conference in 2016. Yeah, in Bangalore. Yeah.
Under 25 summit.
Yes, exactly.
We were both doing different things at the time.
As an architect, I was practicing at that time. I was building buildings and I was polluting. Guilty there. I was practicing at that time, and he was speaking about his earlier work at that time, and that's how I spoke to him. I wasn't into this at that time at all.
2016, so you were what? How old?
I was 17, 18.
So what work were you doing at 17 and 18 that you had to go to a conference to present?
Oh, he's been super crazy in terms of his ambitions. And I think,
Passion.
yeah, it shows. I think he loves buildings. I can say that for him. He was presenting something that he was building as well, and the approach at that time. I think he would be able to explain that much better that time. I don't even remember. I just remember I met him, I spoke to him, I was inspired as well, and then I went on my journey from there.
Yeah, at the time I dropped out of school in 9th grade and started open schooling and started working with the MIT Media Lab. That time was one of the first people to bring 3D printing to India in 2012, 2013, went around colleges teaching students how to do that. And my work with MIT was focused on India initiative. So how do we build cross collaboration between MIT and problems in health tech in India? We ended up building 3 labs across the country. I think more than 100 health tech projects came out of it. I think Ratan Tata eventually ended up funding that program between MIT and India. Yeah, I was working on a series of those health tech projects to democratize ECGs, ophthalmologic technologies for eye problem detection, all those kind of things. And then went back to school and was doing other things. I think started a project called Remake a Village. Like, can you take the maker community of designers, architects, construction folks, teachers to upgrade villages rapidly without government intervention? That sort of work, but climate was always underlying. Started with I worked on electric vehicles, electric race cars in college, then built energy backup systems to power homes in Haiti. And eventually said, this stuff is going to take too long to scale. That's why you should try to find solutions to air pollution and eventually carbon capture. So that's the context. I'm a hardware engineer, fundamentally.
I thought I knew him. So every day you talk to him, you come to know something new. I didn't know more than half of it. That's why you don't find information about Angad everywhere.
Yeah, I had a hard time trying to find information about your technology on your website.
He doesn't speak about it. Just goes doing it.
I think generally saying that the work that we're doing are very big promises to make. So you'd rather deliver first and then tell everyone how you did it, then tell everyone you're doing these things, but fall short in the delivery. I think too many people have done the latter. So our choice was do the former. If you fail, open source all the research and, say what all you tried and didn't work out. So someone can pick it up from there. But yeah, just not the type to go out and make noise.
Not how they say, fake it till you make it kind of a thing. Opposite of that.
Won't get you too far.
So you dropped out of school in ninth grade. And what did your parents think about that? In India, people are very academic focused. That's how my parents were. And I'm assuming that your parents, maybe not supportive, but did they understand why you were doing it?
It would be a problem if I weren't doing well in school. I was doing well in school, but I was very frustrated. And they're not the kind of parents to pressure me for anything. So as far as you are, I think, like you mentioned, parents are academically oriented. My parents are learning oriented. So they don't care whether I learn it from one way or another. As far as I'm learning and growing and doing well, that's all that matters. I think I was always throughout school top 3 of the class. So when I said I want to quit school, it's more of a concern that did someone bully you or something rather than academic trouble. It took like 2 weeks or so, but of conversation with my tutors, I didn't really leave education. I left my school. I did 2 board exams. Normally you'd end up doing 1 if you're in school. And I took those 10th grade exams in my 9th grade. So I had a free year basically. And since I didn't have to go to school, I could learn and do homework at the same time. So I didn't have to go to tuitions or do homework. And that time was spent playing soccer or building things.
That's so great. I wish I had that life. It was totally different for me. It wasn't the same at all. Like mediocre student land up anywhere with that. Parents were always about marks. They always cared whether you passed. How much marks did you get? Was it 80 or was it 95? Why not 96? That's how it was. Those things drove. But I think what really stuck is, as you said, that's the common string, which is what I would take is you don't stop education. You don't stop learning. What really matters is it's a formal education, which is what puts us into workplace oriented jobs that we are in. We are trained for that. We are not trained to solve problems. That's a problem. That's really a problem.
So that was 2016. How did you guys reconnect?
I think I dropped you a message on Instagram or you did, one of the two, right?
I remember I did. I think you were in US at that time. I had seen he was working on the system back then. And there was one of the media posts, I think, that came out. I don't remember.
Yeah, CNN. Yeah, I think I posted a picture. Yeah, I think, that was it.
Correct. And I think that triggered, oh, great, he's working on air pollution as well. And we are working on air pollution as well. So, like, let's connect now. And we had spoken just for like 5 minutes, not even 5 minutes in 2016. That's about it. Not even more than that. But just one message back again. And we both knew that I think you're still trying to solve. It's the same problem. And when you come back, please do let me know and we could sort of catch up. And I think I don't even remember if we met. When did we meet after that? I don't think we met until...
We met in the pandemic when Tejas came to Mumbai for some work. And I think we went on a walk late in the night.
That was 2 years after that, though.
Right.
Yeah.
I have a very slow turnaround time. He's very patient.
When you know the vibe is good, when you know the chemistry is there, when you know that people are genuine to solve the problem, you connect.
So What are you two doing together now? What is your solution?
The aspiration or the designed solution is that Praan's Mark 1 systems capture the particulate matter. We don't sell one device, we sell a cluster. So in a city, you may have, thousands of such clusters purifying air in hyperlocal areas. And our devices collect and store these pollutants for 2 to 6 months based on where you install it, because the particle size is very small. So to make a large number of tiles, you will need a very large number of particulates. Now, these shouldn't be put into the dumpster because they'll end up in landfills and be released back into the air. And that's why the aspiration is to figure out a logistics model which will get these particulates collected across the city and given to Tejas. And they'll do some exciting things with it, which he can throw more light on.
Describe the device to me, the innovation. How big is it?
Yeah, so a single Mark 1 device is 6 feet tall, can be attached to street lamps, sides of buildings, or placed on a stand as you see it on our website. And say like a average Indian campus, residential apartment complex, or which has a cluster of buildings or a school, would have up to 50 devices. So if you're looking at public streets, you're looking at north of 100,000 devices per city, because the impact is hyperlocal. So those devices have to run in a manner that's carbon negative, because our energy comes from coal. So there was tremendous work required there. You have to have your raw material, which is stainless steel, has to be mined thoughtfully. And the companies that we work with are, although in India, are European companies which have to comply with the highest environmental norms if they want to be exporters from India. So they do part of or share part of my grief when it comes to ensuring our raw material is taken care of. Basically, what the device is doing is it's pulling in polluted air, separating the particulates, storing them, and releasing clean air back into the hyperlocal atmosphere.
How is this device different than the scrubbers that they attach to, the flues of, say, a steel mill or a cement plant? Or how is it different?
So I think those are quite large, firstly. Second, when you say scrubber, most of them have some element of liquid for separation, or they're electrostatic precipitators, which generate ozone gas and electromagnetic noise. And these end up costing hundreds of thousands of dollars at the lowest. And you can't use such systems for ambient air. Ambient air is much, much harder than capturing from a pollutant source, because your wind speed, direction, dynamics keep changing in a city based on the architectural changes. And the rate at which pollutants are being introduced onto adjacent properties may be different, because the wind is flowing differently on those properties. So Praan has its own software which will determine, based on your real estate, what number of devices you need and how to place them, and what's the best case impact you can have. So we don't say we're 99.99% particulate removal because we don't sell rainbows. I'll tell you, hey, in best case 22, 23, 25%. But that's a large number from an annual basis. If I'm gifting you 60 days of clean air in a year, I think that's a significant, 2 months of your life every year is a big gift.
Now that you've captured the particles, how do you give it to Tejas?
Yeah, so each of our customer who buys a cluster gets a drum, and they have to empty this collection chamber into that drum, and they keep doing that till it's filled. So that's our internal plan for it. And because it would happen every 2 to 6 months, as we scale, we'll end up developing patterns of which customers and how frequently that gets filled, and you have it picked up. And by then, I think Tejas's company would scale, and probably faster than ours, and they'll need much more pollutants than we can even provide. So we'll be one of the sources for his pollutants.
You talked about the energy that your devices need. What are you using? Are you using solar or some other renewable energy?
Every single customer has an option to add a renewable, which is solar and lithium-ion battery pack add-on, because our devices are low energy and can run off these renewable sources. But let's assume they don't do that, which is what we're expecting in most cases, because people don't have the space or the inclination to spend an extra dollar. So we had to do a life cycle analysis and a operational analysis from a particulate and carbon emission standpoint. And through that, what came out is that even if it's run on coal power, we are net 54% negative in terms of particulate emission. I don't like that number. It needs to be 100%. But the thing that we want to make sure is we're doing more good than harm. And that's what we were able to confirm.
So now the particulate matter has been transported to Tejas. What do you do with it, Tejas?
So essentially, we have a three-stage process that we work with. It is collect, process, build. So we collect the carbon from various partners, as Angad mentioned, or factories directly as well, where the carbon is as a waste in a solid form. Then we send that to our facility in Karnataka, which is in Hubli right now, where we process the carbon. We standardize the carbon for a certain application over here. And then we send this from here to Morbi. Morbi is in Gujarat, west of India, essentially. So Morbi is also the second largest tile manufacturing hub in the world. This is where we work with the 200-year-old craft and artisans, and we build any plain pattern or customizable tiles over here. So that's essentially the larger process of collect, process, and build that we work with. So the way we will get it is also from the perspective of what Angad really outlined. Air pollution essentially has two issues, right? One is how do you capture or collect it? And second is what do you do with it once you've done with that? Because we started with a similar point of view that let's capture and build something with it. That's how we started with a brick. We try to see if we can make a brick, the most basic element which is used for construction, because we started with an audacious plan for ourselves, like can we build carbon negative buildings? And from that vision is when we started running backwards. What do you need? Imagine if you want to make an Indian curry anywhere in this world, you would need those spices and vegetables, right? The right kind of spices and vegetables. If you don't have those ingredients, you can't make that Indian curry. You won't get that taste. So how do you do that? So to make a carbon negative building, you need carbon negative products. And if you don't have those carbon negative products, believe me, you can't make a carbon negative building. So forget the net zero that you're talking about. There are very few carbon negative products out there right now. And we're talking about net zero buildings, and those are really out of the line assumptions that we want to do. So we went down and we do that. Okay, now we are architects, but we can't build with this. Let's build carbon negative products. Let's start with that. Basic brick. And when we started with brick, we thought that, okay, now how do you collect it? So we started to see if someone could give us the carbon, if we can work with that. But it was very expensive. This is 2016, 17 now. It's very expensive to take it because the capture cost was out of the line for people who were working in this. And there was too little carbon that came from the air as well. And all sorts of problems that we can hear. But we made a brick and then we realized, who will buy this? It goes into a wall in India. It's not like in Europe where it's exposed and you can name it and frame it and talk about it and color and everything and texture. In India, it goes inside a wall and there is a paint on top of that. It's not even seen. And you get this red bricks for 4 cents. That's how much you get this for over here. Who will pay for it? No one. So we went from that. We spent about a year.
How much would your brick have cost?
We didn't even go to like calculate that because we didn't do it at scale. We were just trying to evaluate, and we were so excited that we want to make a brick, the basic element. And then we realized that this won't sell. So the first point that we learned over here was you need a design element. So what will people really pay for? People will pay for design. That's what we learned first over here. They don't mind paying for design, but something that goes into a wall, which is again plastered out and not seen, I'm not going to pay for that. That was very clear as value proposition that we got. So it needs design. That's the first thing that we learned. And we took like a year and a half to learn that. In the next year, we still thought we could capture and make it. So we thought, what would people pay for? So we then thought that let's build a facade. So a facade is like an external skin to a building. Imagine like a skin which is covering the entire building, like which is also capturing the air pollutants, but also made out of that. So we went on to make that, but we are no engineers. Like Anga's really talking about it from a very engineering perspective. We are architects. We don't know a heck about technological way of building it and how do you capture it and the weight of the particulate matter and the mass, and we don't know all of it. All what we did was we just put a suction pump outside and we tried to capture the particulate matter through a filter, and we could get dust out of this, and we tried to make it, but dust has no inherent properties as well. So how do you mix it, how do you work with it as a base material? All of that started to have as a problem. We started with that, and then we realized that how many people really want this now? It is not a need based product again. How many people will put this as a feature outside? Not many. So it's not scalable. So the point number two that we learned over here was it's not commercially scalable. So that's when we moved into a third. This is now in 2019 when we really realized this by the end of 2019. So end of 2018. So 2019 early, we decided that, okay, let's choose one problem. You can't fight all the battles. Either you can capture it or you can utilize it. So we took like 3 years to learn this. 3 years to just get to this point.
In the meantime, were you practicing and doing this on the side, or was this your full time?
This is still on the side.
While polluting on the other side.
Yes, I'm really sorry, but this is the hard reality. This is what it is. As Angad said, I'm trying to believe to say that I'm going to do more good than bad eventually. And it's a constant endeavor to be able to be in this journey. It's not this or that. You can't choose this or that here. I mean, if I was born in a very rich ass family, probably I would have done that. I could have done that. But no, we don't have the privilege or the luxury, I would say, to do one. We're trying really hard to take the leap of faith and go on the other side. Once we raise funds, probably we'll be able to do that. But yeah, that's the journey.
You still are an architect.
Yes, I am still an architect. I'm still designing buildings. But in every building that we do, we are trying to push for these strategies, may it be from the space planning perspective, may it be from the material perspective. This helps us learn about new materials in the market. This helps us learn about the construction technologies and how we can bring changes within the systems, because at the end of the day, we are building products for architects, right? For the building. And the vision is to make carbon negative buildings. So we can't be completely off of that because it's a long shot. Probably in 10 years, we will want to build a carbon negative building with all the products made out of carbon negative products, largely. So yes, I'm still practicing as an architect while I'm doing this. Guilty as charged.
Don't worry, I'll make him quit his job soon. He want to raise some money, we'll raise it. He has to tell me when he's ready. It's enough of these building drawings. He has to do this full time.
You have to take the leap of faith and say this is going to happen. And I do think this is about time that Tejas, that you will be able to do it. For instance, you went to Amsterdam. Tell us about that. How did you end up in Amsterdam? What contest was that?
It was last year, I think, we applied for this What Design Can Do competition. It's a no-waste design challenge. It's a global competition that we were a part of. There were various cities, about 6, 7 cities, if I'm not wrong, from various parts of the world: Tokyo, Delhi, Amsterdam, and London, and lots of these other cities that they had a challenge for very specifically. And there were more than some 1,400 applicants for this. And we were one of the 16 participants who won this competition globally. And we were invited to Amsterdam for an accelerator program over there. So we were there for that, to learn more about different cities and how cycling could be a part of a city in the urban fabric. That was amazing to learn in Amsterdam.
So coming back to Angad, your product doesn't have any filters. How did you manage?
Without going into too many specifics of the tech, because that's where a lot of our intellectual property is for the device. A filter is great because it has very high capture efficiency. It's almost like, think of it as a tennis court, but with a massive net where no ball can get through, or very few, like super tiny crazy balls will get through, but most tennis balls and basketballs won't. Right? That's what a filter does. How do you emulate that in the real world without a physical barrier? The reason to do that, if you're looking at outdoor spaces, the volume of air you must purify is order of magnitude or 2 orders of magnitude higher than what you do at home per device. So, and to be able to do it with filters is definitely possible, but it's not viable because the cost is extremely high, and that's going to be paid by taxpayer or end users. And these filters land up in landfills. And if you look at a true HEPA filter, not most of the junk that's sold on the market for low cost, but true HEPA is very expensive. Single home true HEPA purifier filter alone can cost you about 8 to 10,000 rupees, like $120 per filter. What we ended up doing is we ended up becoming the first company which is able to visually capture and see the pollutants. The only challenge is that we don't collect enough of it in clean areas like my house to be able to, in a short time frame, generate a lot of raw material. From a technology perspective, what we had to innovate on was, if you're running a fan constantly to draw in polluted air, one, the suction volume has to be very high, but the energy consumption has to be extremely low. So we took learnings from electric vehicles, from new startups operating in the consumer electronics space to use certain kinds of motors and energy systems. Then to separate it out, we tried to use as much of nature as possible. So we use gravity to a large extent within our devices to allow particulates to settle in the collection chamber. And then we do what we call quantum capture, which separates these particles from the ambient air and drops them into this collection chamber. That's as far as I'm allowed to talk about it in detail, but it's a 3-step process in very layman terms, but it ends up being extremely complicated because the particulate size is very small. The wind dynamics keep changing. And like I mentioned, depends on where you place it and what the pollution levels there are. It's very nuanced.
A lot of magic happens inside the device.
So, how much does this device cost?
We actually don't sell it. What we do is we lease it to low-income schools, to real estate companies, to industries, so that the cost of breathing clean air per person per day is less than 1 rupee. That's 1.3 cents. That's where, if you see our mission and tagline, it's clean air for all. This is for all. It's not a molecule or a Dyson, which are beautiful products, but top 1% can afford it.
Tejas, talk about the products that you are making with Angad's capture.
Essentially, what we do is that we have about 18 plus in-house patterns. So we have various sizes starting from 200 mm by 200 mm, 250 by 250, 300 by 300, and going up to 600 by 1200 mm. That's like really a big size. And the patterns are available only in small sizes, 200 mm by 200 mm, because it's like the small tile. If you have seen these old buildings, old historic buildings, which have these marble chips, like texture of the old with colored sort of these tiles, smaller tiles.
Is it the terrazzo?
Yes, it's a terrazzo tile. You would have seen this in old buildings all around the globe when the way it was made basically earlier. It's the same look and feel, so that you go back, it's classic. We do only black and white. We don't do any color at the moment. No chemicals added from that perspective as well. And we like to keep it bold, black and white, and various sizes that you can get with that at the moment.
So what holds the carbon?
We use various sort of materials. Majorly the materials are marble chips, marble powder, the carbon that's there, and other proprietary materials.
Do you use cement?
Yes, to an extent we use cement as well. But it's way, way lower. At the end of the day, when you see the material palette, one needs to sort of look at it from the perspective of the carbon footprint of the material. It's like comparing the material apple to apple. If I compare our material along with the raw materials that are used and the manufacturing energy that goes into it, what would be the carbon footprint of the carbon tile versus the vitrified tile? You always compare it against one and the other. We are 1/5 in terms of the carbon footprint already. On the other hand, what we're also doing is we are working with industrial byproducts. That's an R&D, constant R&D that we are doing so that we replace even the part of cement that we're using with the industrial byproducts. We've been fairly successful. I wouldn't claim that yet. We've been fairly successful even with that. But scalability with this kind of a raw material becomes an issue because we are looking at it from the global perspective. What I do here in India should be replicated in London tomorrow. And how can I use industrial byproducts, which is sort of largely available globally as well, if we want to scale this? That's one. Second, what we're also trying to do here is we are trying to work with CO2. So storing CO2 into the tiles will reduce the carbon footprint even further. There's like a fourfold plan that we have with using CO2 into the tiles, which will be largely benefits that we're going to have with CO2. And we started with this idea of working with CO2 from the perspective was only because our curing time is very high right now. So essentially, which means if we manufacture these tiles, we need to water cure them for about 28 days. So imagine there's a 50 square meter or a 500 square feet order that comes in. We take about 2 to 3 days or up to 5 days based on the pattern and the intricacy of it. And then we take about 28 days to cure it, which means it's just sitting in the infrastructure, is being water poured on this and is gaining its strength. And then there would be grouting and then other polishes that go into it. And then it's packaged and then shipped. It's a 45-day lead time. And no one wants to wait for 45 days. And we don't have the capital to keep it in inventory. Even if we raise funds, we still won't be able to keep the target of 1 million square feet, which is what we want to achieve in the next 2 to 3 years with this lead time, with that inventory line. We can't. So we need to figure out a way of how we deal with this lead time. So that's when we thought that why don't we cure this with CO2? And curing this with CO2 will have 4 larger benefits. One, CO2 will give it the strength. So not only the carbon in the solid form, but also in the gaseous form would be stored and sequestered into the tile. 2, the carbon footprint of the tile would be further reduced from what it is. And hopefully we are able to store so much more carbon into the tile that it becomes a carbon negative tile. 3, the curing time reduces. This is the major. Curing time reduces from 28 days to 8 hours. That's an exponential growth for us right away over here. So imagine how we can sort of scale the system right away. And fourth is, this is actually also critical for us. We may use, if we are at the target of 1 million square feet, we would use 3 billion liters of water to cure it if we do the water curing. And this would come down to 0 with CO2 curing.
So you're saying if you took Angad's raw material, that's the change that will happen?
Yes. So Angad has essentially, as he spoke earlier, he's essentially doing both. As we spoke about from the start, we started from air pollution as the issue, which is the particulate matter, and then moved into CO2 as well. So now we can essentially use both from whatever Angad's capturing. So again, we come back to the same problem, basic problem of air pollution. How do you collect or capture it? Second, what do you do with it? So he would capture the PM particles and the CO2 separately, and we would be able to use both separately into the same tile and store it for decades and even for generations.
I think, as you mentioned, right, our goal, or I think ambition of many of us carbon capture and utilization companies, is to store it away for more than 1,000 years. If you do it in a liquefied form over thousands of years, you'll end up having oil again on this planet. So we don't want to leave or get future generations to go back to this stage. And so the preference is to not go that route, and is to store it away permanently in materials. So if you use it in building materials, you have at least 100 years. And then there are additional ways where you can really put it underground for thousands of years by compressing it, liquefying it, and making it inaccessible for immediate use.
How much would this tile cost?
At the moment, one tile costs about $2, and we are looking to scale our production unit once we raise funding. With that, we would be able to come down to $1 per tile.
How much funding would you need to trigger you to leave your job and do this full time?
So many people have asked me this question, and I always end up saying as much funding as we can get at the initial stages. And I think that answer would stay sort of constant for most of the startups. But we need about $1 million at the moment to scale our production to 1 million square feet. And with that, we would be able to create an impact with 3 billion liters of air that we would be able to prevent, and also the social inclusivity that the artisans will be able to work with. So we'll be able to sort of add 100 artisans into our team with this.
So, are there any toxic chemicals which remain in the final product that are captured?
And we also have ROHS certification. So ROHS is restriction of hazardous substances. So we've cleared that certification as well, which means that this is one of the most stringent certifications for us to export to Europe as well. We can do that if we have an enough sizable order.
Why is Europe so ahead of, say, US or India is making great strides, but Europe is so much more ahead in this front? Why is that? And I understand like the government implements policies. And from what I know, EPA regulations in many countries are probably just as stringent, but there is no public acceptance. What is different about the people in those countries?
If you have to carry 50 bricks versus if you have to carry 1300 bricks, the rate at which you can make progress is going to be different. So if you have a country with a population of 50 million and you have a country with a population of 1.3 billion, the rate of change is different. That being said, and at the same time, most of these countries were those that ruled. We were a country that was ruled. So we were significantly resource depleted and are not even 100 years old as a country, right, with respect to independence. So given that time frame, we've made astronomical progress. What needs to change aggressively, and I have no doubt whether it is central government or certain state governments in this country, they acknowledge that this problem exists and there is an intention or a underlying belief that this must be changed. So what causes people to move in a direction is you either personalize the problem for them or you motivate those people in manners which they are motivated, politically or financially. By no means am I saying bribery, but to make, I think people in power care about how they look more than the work they're doing, and they want to remain in power. So if you can make them look good while trying to make drastic change, you are going to make progress happen. So if you don't have to worry about vaccinating 1 billion people and spend money on that, you have tremendous amount of resources left to plant trees and go carbon negative and whatnot, like European cities do.
But I think at the end of the day, we are all looking at population as a larger, unique situation, right? We are in. While I was in Amsterdam, I can share this. There was a company where they made bricks out of the polluted soil that was there. And they used heat to sort of get rid of all the chemicals from the soil. And then they made bricks out of this. I asked, what price can you sell this at? Because we were there, right, about 4 years ago. And we shared our experience and why one can't do this. And I was surprised. I was really surprised. The price of the brick ranges from $0.17 to $250 per brick.
$2.50 or $250?
$0.17 to $250. I repeat, $250 per brick. It's crazy.
You'll have to put the name and, like frame it or something at that price. You can't build a building with that.
Yeah.
It's definitely a Supreme brick. They printed Supreme on the brick and they sold it.
It is literally stamped on each of those bricks and it's put out on the wall, on the exterior wall, and that's how they sell it. And it's crazy for me to think because, so what's the scale factor here? How are you going to scale this? Because in India, you get this for 4 cents. And no one's going to buy it for more than that. Even if you sell them this with gold, no one will buy it. It's too expensive. And that's the change I'm talking about. Like the market is really mature over there. People talk about sustainability. They want low carbon intensive products. It's not the same in India. We have different challenges here.
And willing to pay.
It's a very different challenge in India, and I don't think we can compare that. So, like an apple to apple situation again. But talking about the Indian context here. It is very difficult to work in this context. It has its own challenges again, like how Angad mentioned. I am positive again, and like as an architect as well as a human being who are trying to solve problems, you got to be positive about the future, and you have to be, or else you can't build moonshot startups. You have to be positive about the future. It is going to be good. So one of the mails that we got was from the Delhi government. I'll just share this quick. They were excited about the tiles, and they told, why don't we use this? You are taking this carbon and we can sort of use it in government buildings in Delhi. We can do this. And talks went further, and then we discussed this. They realized the carbon that we are sourcing right now is not from Delhi. So the question came, it's not from Delhi, but air doesn't have a border. Air pollution doesn't have any border. So why is that a matter of a concern right now? You can still use this and deploy it, right? But no, it's not Delhi air that you're cleaning. So how do I put it? So is there any factory that is there in Delhi that you can put your machine or you can take the carbon from and then you can make this? I'm like, no, not right now.
Ask them to give me a call. I'll deal with this for you.
Yeah, I think that's what's required.
So it's the optics they're looking. They want to solve it, but they also want the optics of saying, see, there we are solving the problem in Delhi. We are central government and we are there in the capital.
It's not central, it's the state. I think I've dealt with the same that Tejas is talking to.
It's the state. And that's exactly what Angad really mentioned, right? If you can make them look good, they are really interested. They want to talk about it. They want to solve this problem. And the way they are solving the problem is really weird. I mean, we can go on and on about that as well. They put this machine in the center, I don't know where, in Delhi right now. And I don't know if it does anything.
And what is this machine that you're talking about?
Yeah, it's a $2 million smog tower that's supposed to purify the air in the cities. It uses HEPA filters that the taxpayer pays for, which lands up in landfills. It uses more energy than I think a cluster of buildings combined to run all those gigantic fans, which end up emitting coal particulate matter into the air. Did I mention it costs $2 million? Yes. So you can buy 2,000 Mark I systems for $2,000. That's after Praan paying itself. So just imagine where this is going. Without being particular dissing people, the basic question that they are not asking themselves is that you cannot solve an infinite volume problem with a finite volume machine. Praan doesn't purify the atmosphere. We create microclimates that have cleaner air. I think one of my mentors is Ramesh Raskar, who's a professor at MIT. And he had said this to me 3 years ago when I embarked on this journey. He said, don't chase rainbows. Think about the problem and try to solve that problem. The rainbow is that I'm going to purify the atmosphere. Is it possible from a physics perspective? No.
Mm-hmm.
So do what's possible and we'll solve the problem.
I've completely enjoyed talking to both of you and learned so much in this episode.
No, thanks for having us, and hopefully more people can listen to this and get excited about doing things in climate or air pollution. We need like 1,000 more companies like ours, then something will happen.
Is your technology patented?
Yes.
So how will 1,000 more companies?
They got to work hard and build it themselves. Nobody would fund me if I didn't patent it.
Air pollution is a complex issue. This is just one part of what we are trying to solve. It's not that this is the only way you can solve. There are various other companies as well, even today, who are trying to solve it in different ways. We can be sort of critical about how they solve it. The only thing that I think we should remember is if you're solving a problem, don't create another problem. That's what I would say. Because we try really hard to make a product where you can reuse it back again and it doesn't end up creating one more problem. That is why we are also coming out of the water problem that we are creating and trying to use CO2 back again. It's important to address these issues that usually end up solving one problem and end up creating another big problem.
On that really positive note and insightful note, thank you so much, Tejas and Angad, for coming on Mindful Businesses.
Pleasure. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. We had a fun time. I hope people who are listening and you as well had a great time.
I just was all smiles just watching you two banter and talk. It made my day. You're listening to Mindful Businesses, presented by Vidya Iyer. We would love to hear from you. Send us a voice note with your questions or comments to info@mindfulbusinessespodcast.com. Rate and review us on Apple Podcast. If you learned a thing or two from this episode, share it with one friend. We recorded this podcast in Lafayette, Indiana. Theme music was composed by Tatum Gale. Our marketing assistant is Caitlin Milligan. This is Vidya Iyer with Mindful Businesses.